PT says I'm doing great. Still hurts like hell, and I'm very impatient. But I mean, I walk up the steps. I barely use. I brought the walker because of the hallways. I was afraid my leg would get tired, but normally I don't use it. So I'm at the point where I'm. This morning I started going down the steps a little bit. I know. Yeah. Oh, I know. That I could. That's no problem. I'm trying to do. Yeah. Oh, I know. Sometimes I'm there and I'm like, and other times I know I can do it. Yeah. It's really funny.
Question.
Thank you.
When I present the slate, do I then ask for a motion to accept it?
I don't know if you need a motion. This
Okay.
is not a
So we're just voting?
formal meeting. Yes.
Can I just, and I'm just going to say anybody opposed, raise your hand.
Yes, the slate is presented for approval. You can ask Harriet Weiner because she's the only one that will get bent out of
Right,
shape.
where is she?
So she will tell you
What's
whether
she wearing?
She's right there with the red and the black.
Okay, I'll find her.
Behind
ask
there.
her, or you just say, and I would ask for anyone opposed.
That's what she said. That's what
You're
she
right.
said.
Okay. Did we have enough name tags for today?
Yes.
Okay. Oy, these lights.
I know. And it gets me hot. It's 11:27. 11:27.
And we have to wait till everybody else comes up anyway, because I'm marching up.
Helen, Marcia, Jane, Robin.
Did you see how many, were you copied on the cancellations? We had, I'm thinking at least 20, if not more. Unbelievable. Up through this morning.
I know, Myra's sick.
I don't know, one person fell, that I know.
I don't know if it's with this. Maybe Lou, I don't know.
He's doing
Never
fine.
mind. Never mind. And Louise, like, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it's still a nice crowd, but we had at least 2 to 3 more tables. But unbelievable. Never seen something. Well, they were at the meet and greet. Have they broken yet?
Yeah, I think so. And I texted her what table I'm at. And I thought the meet and greet was like over, isn't it?
Isn't she looking for you?
I told her what table I was at. All right, I just thought maybe you saw it.
I saw her at the meet and greet, but I don't know where she is now. She'll find you.
See her, I got a seat for her.
Are you texting each other? Are you texting?
I texted her.
All right. Have you seen Patty Levin?
Yeah, she was in the meet and greet.
Yeah, but is she here?
Is it over?
Probably.
She's looking for one of the new members.
What?
She's sitting with her, but she can't find her.
What's her name? I can just get on the mic.
Yeah, nah. Because usually they break
Is it
sooner than this.
Marcy that she's looking for? Is she looking
Millicent,
for Millicent?
the short blonde
Yeah.
hair. What did her? Well, yeah, I'll be a lot. Well,
I'm thinking the 14th.
Harriet Cohn.
Okay,
from
I'll
the
get her
store.
later.
Yeah, they were
I mean, I
walking
don't see her
around.
walking.
No, it's
She
about-
was
They've been walking around.
Yeah,
Never mind. I just wanted to say
Ready.
hello.
I saw her.
Yeah, they
She's
were.
on
They
here.
they might not be near
Oh,
you. but
Amy.
they're-
Amy.
She usually sits in the. Yeah, hang on. Harriet Cohn, if you're here, raise your hand. People are asking about raffles. Harriet Cohn. Next to my white coat. The white coat, next to my white coat. Either one.
Do you know if Barbara Green's here today?
She is not.
Okay, what
She's
about
stuck in
Glenda?
Florida. Glenda's here.
Okay, I didn't know who to give money to. That's all. So
Glenda
Glenda's
is here. I
She's
just
usually in
saw
the
her.
back.
I just saw her walk in. But Barbara is stuck in Florida because her husband tripped and fell on his face. He didn't.
Yes, you know,
He
making a
didn't break
cry.
any
Not
bones,
because
but
of that.
he's.
Every day I'm hearing about
I
so
know.
many people.
I know.
It's
It's
like
weird.
How many things?
They walk every day and
just
just.
takes a minute. I
Yeah.
am such a lunatic because when I used to go with my mother, I'd say, "Now be careful, be careful when you walk on the
I
outside.
know.
Watch the curb." Do
I
this, do
know.
that."
I used to say to
and
my mother,
I say,
"Look
I hope I'm
down."
not annoying you, but
Oh, my mother was in the emergency room a million times with broken ankles, broken wrists. I said, "Ma,"
yeah, right.
and
I
we used to
used
walk
say,
her.
"Be
I said, "You gotta
careful,
look
the pavement's
down."
not steady."
I know. I know.
I mean, it's meant in a good way.
Okay. Okay, we're going to get started in a few seconds. Come in and take your seats, please, so we can start our meeting. There's still people walking in the door, but we're going to get started. Okay, ladies, we're going to begin our meeting. It's officially called to order. Shh. Why does that work? Good morning, everyone. My name is Freddie Silverman. I am one of the co-presidents of the Bethel Sisterhood. My co-president, Gail Glick, and I would like to welcome all of you to our 7th Sisterhood program of this year. We would like to open this meeting on a bit of a solemn note. The events in Israel these past few weeks, some joyous with the release of more hostages, although a bit tinged with anger for the fake ceremonies that some of them had to endure, along with the deep sadness of the knowledge that other hostages were killed in captivity and only their remains are being returned, have been very difficult to deal with, whether you have close familial ties with Israel or not. In addition to all of our private prayers and on the advice of our clergy, we offer the following prayer for the state of Israel. It is the prayer called Avinu Shebashamayim. Rock and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, the start of flowering of redemption. Shield it with your love, spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Establish for them your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of the defenders of our holy land. Cause them to inherit our God. Deliverance, place the crown of victory upon them. Give the land peace and everlasting joy to its inhabitants, and let us say, Amen. Thank you. At each table, you will see a supply of name tags and a pen. We hope that you've sat with some newer members and we'll get to know them. But even if you know everyone at your table, grab a name tag, put your name on it, because when you're in the lunch buffet line, it's an excellent opportunity to meet some other members. And some of us are at the point where we don't remember everyone's name, even though we know them. So it's very helpful to see it right in front of you. Okay. Thank yous are, of course, always in order. To Michelle Weisbrot and her very efficient sign-in team for a smooth registration. And I have to give Michelle some additional credit because her phone literally is constantly busy right before a luncheon with people saying, have I registered yet? Can I still register? What the with every question possible, with additions, cancellations, and she does a marvelous job. Thank you. To Ruth Green and her co-decorators for making the outfit always a warm, welcoming, and lovely place to be. To Donna Unterman and her food committee for making sure we are well fed and also, at times, serving us. To Robin Kleiman and Dale Kahn and the entire programming committee, who have arranged another excellent program for us today, which we know you will find extremely interesting. Remember that if you're interested in raffles, Harriet Cohn and maybe some helpers are walking around selling raffles. They are seated for now, but we'll be selling them again before, possibly after the lunch. If you haven't bought yours already, they will be circulating, and we'll make some announcements so you can buy them. The prize is always a gift certificate to our Judaica shop. One raffle is $3 or 3 for $5. For the past few months, the nominating committee has been diligently working on putting together a new slate of officers and board members for the coming year. The slate was approved by the current board in February, and we would like to call Jane Sachs up as chair of the nominating committee to present the slate to the membership for approval.
Thank you, Freddie. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I will eat the mic, okay? I'm happy to present the slate for our officers for 2025-2026. President Gail Glick, Vice Presidents Myra Coonan, Helen Friedman, Patty Levin, Financial Secretaries Fran Crystal, Renee King, Barbara Roth, Recording Secretary Harriet Weiner, Corresponding Secretary Marcy Kaplan, Parliamentarian Edie Bondroff, Treasurer Barbara Green, Comptrollers Glenda Chernoff and Alice Curick, and our 9 new board members, Leslie Bornstein, Leslie Denrich, Minda Goldberg, Marcia Golub, Jane Crozen, Nina Rosenzweig, Eva Savan, Debbie Shore, and Linda Boteach. So now I need a motion to accept this slate. Sandra Cameron, and second? Call some. Jane Crozen. Okay. All opposed to this slate for the coming years? Okay, well, let's do it again. All opposed? All right, thank you very much. Congratulations, should we have them stand if they're here? Can we have them stand if they're here? No, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. You realize that if any of you were opposed to it, it automatically means you'll be on the slate for next year. So, smart move. Okay. One more announcement, and I'd like your attention. The Social Action Committee has begun its annual Passover food drive, asking for monetary donations, which will be used to purchase gift cards from Klein's ShopRite, Giant Foods, and 7 Mile Market. These donations will benefit the women and children of Hana and any Bethel families in need to help them purchase Passover foods. As most of us are blessed to be able to purchase kosher for Passover foods, we hope to make this a bit easier for those in need. Please help us make Passover a joyful time for those in need. Send or take a check payable to Bethel Social Action Committee with Passover food drive noted on the memo line. You can drop it at the office. You can also leave cash at the front desk in an envelope addressed to Social Action Passover food drive. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to call up our wonderful vice presidents for the wonderful job that they're doing. First, I'd like to call upon Helen Friedman.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to start off with our program committee, and can't hear me? Can you hear me now? No? Okay. It's when I look down. I'll try my best. Okay, please join us for our next program 1 month from today, and please make a note of the date, time, and different format. Instead of our usual Sisterhood meeting followed by our speaker, we will be hosting a dessert tea on Monday, March 31st at 2 p.m. Our speaker will be Sheila Murthy. Sheila is a lawyer, entrepreneur, and philanthropist, perhaps best known as founder and president of Murthy Law Firm based in Owings Mills with satellite offices in India. A native of India, Sheila and her husband established the Murthy Nayak Foundation to channel their philanthropic contributions to nonprofits that serve the needs of women, children, and immigrants. She is recognized as a top international corporate immigration lawyer and has received countless awards for her work. Sheila has been featured in the New York Times, the Daily Beast, and the Story Exchange. This is certainly a timely topic, and we look forward to hearing from our speaker. And Myra, who is not able to be with us today, asked me to please let you know that it's in person. That in-person registration deadline is March 19th, and that the program is part of the Meeting Luncheon subscription series. Okay. Next, we have the following. We have the Meet the Authors program. Our final Zoom program will be on March 10th at 7:30 p.m. Our author, Emily Machar, has written the novel In the Shadow of the Greenbrier. It is a sweeping saga set in the backdrop of the legendary Greenbrier Resort in the hills of West Virginia. The story is about a multi-generational Jewish family living in the shadow of this resort and its fascinating secret history. It explores a clash between the past and the future. With our fantastic moderator, Julie Bernstein, learn about what inspires this author, how she chose her subject, and anything else that you want to know. You don't have to read the book ahead of time to enjoy the programs. You can sign up for this final program and have an entertaining evening for the reasonable price of $12. Remember, you can watch these Zoom programs from anywhere, so if you are away for the winter, you can still join us. Okay, next is Sisterhood Shabbat, and both Merle and Barbara said good morning. This is just a reminder that Sisterhood Shabbat is being held on Saturday, May 3rd this year. If anyone in Sisterhood hasn't RSVP'd yet, it's not too late. Please fill out the online form or contact Barbara Green or Merle Intner by email or phone. We are especially looking for 1 or 2 more Torah readers. Please keep in mind that if you can read Hebrew, Ben Kreschel can work with you to learn a Torah portion. We will be assigning parts soon and will announce our rehearsal date as it gets closer to May 3rd. Please reach out with any questions. Okay, next I have a report from Social Action. Our March collection, which is today, Marsha Boonschaff and Anita would like to thank you for your generosity. Now through Friday, March 4th, drop-off at Bethel is the Woodhome Elementary School book collection, and it's new books for ages 4 to 11. And in addition, they're accepting cash or checks made out to Bethel's Social Action Committee. And we did need volunteers to the Hope Lodge event, but it looks like it's totally covered at this point, so thank you to everybody who was attending. And Passover food drive, we already heard about. So that's a lot of stuff from Social Action. And next I have the Unique Boutique Report, and hold the dates for Sunday and Monday, April 27th and 28th. And it looks like we have reached our maximum with 33 committed vendors and the flower sale. That's amazing. Randy just said we're up to 38. That's what you said at 33. Raffles are continuing to be sold online. You can also purchase in person at the boutique, but take advantage of the ease of online purchase. You don't have to be present to win. We have great products and services to win. We're still seeking contributions for the silent auction. If you have donations, you can contact the office and we will return your call. If you use any vendors for services like manicures, restaurants, other stores, you can ask if they would like to provide a gift certificate for the raffle. We will need volunteers to work on the day of the boutique, and I did put up some sign-up sheets in the back if anybody would like to take care of that. Okay, and as I said, Myra unfortunately isn't able to join us today. She wanted to let us know that the Joint Sisterhood Dinner will take place on April 1st at 6 p.m. at Beth Israel. Cost is $40 for Sisterhood members and $45 for non-members. The entertainment is a comedian who also does some magic. The delicious dinner... Oh, there are flyers on the tables, Gail just said. The entertainment is a comedian who also does some magic. The delicious dinner will be chicken marsala. You can pay via credit card with a link on the Sisterhood website or by check using the flyer. Registration ends on March 14th. Please be sure your check is at the Bethel office no later than March 14th. There will be no registration at the door. This is a nice opportunity to meet and chat with other sisterhoods. And I know there had been a discussion about maybe carpooling, so if anybody has any questions about that, let me know. The JTS Torah Fund, the JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary, sells cards for all occasions, 6 cards for $20. This supports the seminary that educates Jewish clergy. Our clergy all went there. Amy in the office has cards, or you can contact Jane Croson. Jane has cards at the meetings or at her home, and I know I saw the cards up there today. Gail, too. Okay. The Judaica shop is ready for spring. They have beautiful and unique items for Shabbat, Passover, B'nai Mitzvah, and hostess gifts. Please stop in and check out all the shop has to offer. Hours are Monday through Friday, 12 to 2, or by appointment with Marcy Kaplan or Susan Goldshire. And the shop will be open today during and after the meeting and luncheon. As Myra also wanted to give a big thank you to Donna Underman and her food committee for a delicious lunch today, to Michelle Weisbrot and her check-in committee for handling the luncheon reservations, and to Patty Levin for the new member outreach meet and greets that she holds before each meeting. Welcome to all the new members, and thank you to all. Myra wants to thank all of her all of her committee co-chairs for all of the work they do for Sisterhood. Thank you, everybody. And we have one last one. Robin Kleiman is going to give a little talk about the trip committee.
Hello, everybody. You may remember that we've been asking you to save the date of for our April the 6th trip to New York. We are still asking you to save the date, but hot off the press, just for one more day. There has been an unavoidable last-minute change to the itinerary. The backstage tour of the opera has been unceremoniously canceled. I know. Luckily, we have a creative and unflappable trip committee, and we have come up with a new plan, which we feel will be another Sisterhood trip winner. Our afternoon tour has not changed. We are still scheduled to tour the limited engagement of Anne Frank, the exhibition, which just opened at the end of January. The exhibition includes a full-scale recreation of the annex where Anne Frank and her family members spent 2 years in hiding. But the exhibition is really so much more than the recreation itself. It's an immersive experience from what I've read. It includes artifacts that have never been seen outside of Amsterdam, images of Anne's early life, and then it goes beyond that to chronicle the time when Otto Frank, Anne Frank's father, returned from Auschwitz. And he was the sole remaining survivor of the 8 people who were in hiding. This exhibition is a particularly important reminder, especially at this time in our country's history. So that's what hasn't changed. Now for what has. Our morning in New York has shifted from the opera to trains, specifically Grand Central Terminal. And believe me, this place is so much more than trains. We will have a guided tour of the sites that frequent commuters have never before experienced, the unknown treasures of the station. So here's a little teaser, some facts. Grand Central Terminal is the largest train station in the world, 49 acres. 750,000 people go through the terminal daily, and on holidays, they're estimating that it's closer to 1 million. The ceiling of the main concourse is a world-famous astrological mural, which you'll get to see. It's amazing. The station has something called a whispering gallery. You'll see what that's all about. There's actually a public tennis court in there. All trains have clocks, right? This one has a Tiffany clock, and it has a clock in the main the main hall that's estimated value is $20 million. So, as I've said, so much more than trains. Grand Central is packed with sights, history, and architecture. What I didn't mention that there's actually a dining concourse there with many options from casual takeouts to fancier restaurants. There's shopping in the terminal, all under one roof. You'll have plenty of time between the Grand Central tour, which will begin at 11, and the Anne Frank exhibition, which is later in the afternoon. So you're going to have time to eat lunch, explore other attractions in the area, and we will provide you with ideas. There's a lot in the area. Saks is 0.3 miles away. The New York Central Library is close by. The Morgan Library is close by as well. So we'll let you know what's there, and we will be taking care of the transportation between the two venues. So wherever you go, you're going to meet back at Grand Central at the meeting time that we'll let you know about, and we will take you to the Anne Frank exhibit. I just want to send a huge shout out, even though she's not in this room, to Esty. I sent the flyer information for the Grand Central tour, which really just happened. I sent it to her this morning, and guess what? The flyer is done. So it will, I know, wow, we're so lucky. So we will be opening the trip for registration tomorrow to Sisterhood members only, and it'll be on the Bethel website as well. I'll send you the flyer. 1 week later, it will open to congregation members and spouses and significant others, and then 1 week later to everyone else. So that's what we've come up with. I hope it sounds great. Our final trip of the year will be, or of the season, will be on May the 6th. That's a trip to Hillwood. Hillwood is the home, or was the home, of Marjorie Merriweather Post, and the tour will include a guided tour of the gardens and the house with lunch there as well. So more information on that. Thank you for supporting us.
Thank you, Robin. And now I'd like to call Marsha Boonshaft.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Better? Okay. My first announcement is about Rabbi Sorokin's book review, and I'm sure you've all seen the flyer. Rabbi Sorokin will be joining with us to review the book People Love Dead Jews by Dara Horn on Wednesday, May 12th at 12:15 in the Offit. This insightful book was a New York Times Notable Book of the Year and a Wall Street Journal and Publishers Weekly Best Book of the Year. Many consider it especially relevant given the events that have occurred beginning October 7th, 2023. The event is free, drinks will be provided, and you're welcome to bring a dairy lunch. Please register so that we know how many to set up for. When you register, make sure when you are responding to Lauren Lesser, do not use the period at the end of com. That was a mistake. And if you just send it to, excuse me, lslesser811@gmail.com. And I want to let you all know that Knitsfa project is ongoing, and everything that you knit, if you knit your 10-inch squares, they can be made into beautiful lap blankets. Spring afternoon of games, we have a wonderful turnout. There are already 41 tables asked for. We have up to 50 tables, so if you're still interested in playing Mahjong or Canasta or Bridge or Scrabble, please take a brochure and sign up. And wanted to let you know that it will be from 12 to 3:30 with registration starting at 11:30, and you'll be allowed to go into the room after you register, and you can take lunch as you desire. You don't have to wait to be called. My next announcement is for the Federation. of Jewish women's organizations. They're having their general meeting on March 20th, a Thursday, at Beth Israel Synagogue. Registration's at 9:30 and the program begins at 10. A light breakfast will be served. No charge for this program. The speaker is Dan Finkelstein, who will talk about understanding artificial intelligence. I'd like to tell you to look for Sisterhood Donor, No Donor. All Sisterhood members can make a contribution, and for those contributing more than $75, there will be a tea featuring Rabbi Stephen Schwartz. And my last message is for Passover candy and gifts. I know you will enjoy, as you have in the past, purchasing candy and gifts from Morgan Truesdale and Rosh Hashanah wine and spirits. And this year we're hoping to have them available at the Wine Loft. And excuse me, more information will be forthcoming. So thank you all for your support. Thank you to my my chair, who do such a hard job to get information out to you. Thank you.
One of the things that everyone can do to help Sisterhood to do more is be a program sponsor, which means making a donation to honor or in memory of someone or something and having that donation announced at the next program. Bobby Selnick will read the sponsors for our meeting today.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Well, it's been a busy morning and a busy couple days. There's been a lot of sponsorship. So on behalf of myself and Gloria Luchinsky, I'd like to announce them, and also to let you know that the next tea at the end of this month, I will also announce sponsorships. But after that, we have April, there's Joint Sisterhood, and the May meeting is a closing meeting. It's a different kind of format. So if you're interested in sponsorships, try for the end of this month. If not, I'll have to hold them until the beginning, which could be, I guess, in September. So just consider that. So let's get started. This one's from Susan Goldsecker in honor of the continuing recovery of Freddie Silverman's surgery. Goldshire. What did I say? I'm sorry. I have to learn to read. Randy Jacobs, got that one right, in honor of Freddie's successful knee surgery. Beverly Penn, a very lovely donation in honor of her granddaughter, Leah Penn, becoming the director of the aftercare clinic at Johns Hopkins Hospital and for passing her addiction medical board. So congratulations to Leah. Barbara Levinson gave a donation on the birth of Lois Balser's new great-grandson, Oren. So mazel tov to Lois, wherever Lois is over there. Leslie Monfried, I don't know if Leslie's here today or not, in memory of Susan Grilly. I think maybe many of you know her. And unfortunately, we've got a bunch of sponsorships in memory of Carol Matz, who was a member of Sisterhood. She was an officer, a friend of so many of us. So the first one is in memory of our member, Carol Matz. That's from Freddie Silverman. I gave a contribution of our Sisterhood member, congregant, and friend, Carol Matz. Dee and Harold Simons gave a very generous, lovely contribution in memory of Carol Matz. Betsy Narrow in memory of Carol Matz. And Roz Kerman also gave one in memory of Carol Matz. Charlotte Foreman, in honor of her granddaughter Alyssa's acceptance to the University of Maryland's Masters of Nursing program. Congratulations to that family. And back to Roz Kerman, in honor of the 65th wedding anniversary of Linda and Jerry Mondell. So mazel tov to them. And Thank you, and you know the money goes right to Sisterhood, so we appreciate it. Can I announce Esther? Can I announce Esther? Okay. Next up, Esther Shine's going to read a prayer. Yeah, Esther Shine's going to read a prayer that, and Freddie and I talked a lot before the meeting, but we didn't discuss that we both covered Israel, so it's not a repeat, but it's similar. Okay, thank you, Esther. Yeah, you could do it down there. That's fine.
Make sure it's on.
I'm not experienced. Okay, here I go. A prayer of gratitude for the return of Israeli hostages. Blessed are you who has freed the captives. May it be your will, Lord our God and God of our ancestors, that you protect, guard, strengthen, uplift, comfort, and give us strength. Our cherished, redeemed captives who have returned to their families, embraced after nights and days of unknowing suffering. Please, God, heal them, embrace them, and their loved ones with your loving kindness, and give them the strength for the long road back to wholeness in body and soul. Healer of the brokenhearted, bind up their suffering, heal their wounds, and enable them to rise to the morrow with renewed strength and faith in the goodness of humanity and the beauty of life. May we soon see the return of all of our brothers and sisters who remain in captivity, so we can see the fulfillment of your promise. And let us all say amen. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take Esther's job. And everybody needs to find their bread so we can say the motzi together. So I'll give you a minute to pass your bread around. Okay, I hope we can all say this together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Okay, that concludes the business meeting. Marlene Siegel, I believe, will be calling table numbers for the buffet. And once the meal is finished, we will be selling the raffles again. Okay? Thank you.
Was missing, and I got like a half an hour. I just panicked. I went to look for it. All right, lady, kitchen side, as you know, is this side. This is the window. Look for the letter of the serving table that I call for you. Kitchen side, A table 2. Table 2, you're at A table. Kitchen side, table 21, you're at table B. Window side, table 3 is at table C, and table 18 is at D. Please go immediately when you are called. We have hot food, which we would like you to get while it's hot. Window side. Table 3 is the window side, and table 18, you're the window side. Table 2, you were to go to table A. Table 2, would you please go to table A? Kitchen side, table 9, go to the A table. Table 5, window side, please go to table C. Table B, excuse me, table 15, go to table B on the kitchen side. And table 19, go to table D on the window side. Table 1, go to the kitchen side, table A. Table 20, go to the kitchen side, table B. Table 12, go to the window side, table C. Table 12 is going to the window side. And table 17 is going to table D on the window side. Table 4, wait, sorry. The people didn't go. Table 13 on the window side, go to the D table. Table 13, please go to the table D. Table 7, please go to the kitchen side. Table A.
Where did 12 go? To the C?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay, they're there. Okay, you need more people at 7, down at the bottom.
I just called them.
What number is that? No, at that side over there.
I just called them.
What table did you just call?
I don't remember.
That's kitchen. You
No,
just
no,
called
this
kitchen.
is the
17.
window side. I
Yeah,
called
17.
17. Table 17, you were called to go to the D table on the window side. On the kitchen side, table 11, go to the B table. Table 4, you were not called. Table 4 will go to the C table. Table 8, go to the kitchen side, table A.
Table over there. That's D.
Oh, they're there right now.
D. 13. Did you call 13?
Yeah.
6.
I'm
4.
gonna, I will.
Okay. You need more people down.
Table 6, go to the, no, I'm sorry, table 16, go to table D.
Going to the bathroom. They didn't hear. 15. Did you call 15?
Long time ago.
I know. 15 what? I was in the bathroom.
At B.
Hey.
Table 14, kitchen side, table B. Table 6 on the window side, table C. Table 10, go to table A. On the kitchen side. Table 9, go to table B on the kitchen side. All tables have been called.
If you'd like to buy raffles and you have not, Harriet Cohn is walking around. She's now up front at table 3, but put your hands in the air and we will get around to you. Okay? Anybody interested in raffles?
has to be like that has to be facing the mat. Okay. So just have to see how that works. So we can that.
Beer cart ladies.
You're not going to start here.
Well, you know, we usually start.
Why don't you just start with Chavalay
JP.
Nevarech?
I thought we started here.
Yeah,
We
you
just-
start with here. Yeah, Chavalay Nevarech.
Oh, right.
One.
Right.
Yeah, one.
Right.
Will you help me do this?
Absolutely.
I don't know how to do the lead. She wants me to be the leader. I'm not
No,
the
I
leader.
think you should be the leader, and I'll just do it with you.
You do it
Because
with
I
me.
can't carry a tune.
Oh, okay. Well, you can.
Haverach, Nevarech. Chavalay Nevarech.
There, you can carry a tune.
Wait.
Will all the beer cart babes please come to the front?
Where? Who else is here? Sharon?
Linda, maybe Linda Botea.
Yeah.
Susan. Where's Susan Ackerman?
She went to the bathroom.
With Linda and
Linda's coming up. Sonia's coming up.
where's Susan?
She went to the bathroom. There's no Betsy. No.
You're in charge.
No. Eva's gonna help me.
Dun 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 dun.
All right. Should we wait for Susan Hackerman? It's not quarter of yet.
It's not
You do a great job of communication, I'm telling you.
Yes, it is. It is quarter of.
It is.
There's so much to say.
All right. Well,
All right.
Let's just do it.
Okay.
hello to Betsy, listening from home.
Okay. First of all, before we do the beer cot, everyone up here and everyone there say, "Hi, Betsy." 1, 2, 3.
Hi, Betsy.
Thank you. All right. Is anyone else coming up to join us? Betsy's at home with a boo-boo on her foot. All right. Take out your beer cot cards, please. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Haverai nevarech, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach me'ata ve'ad olam. Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach me'ata ve'ad olam. Bershut Haverai nevarech Eloheinu shelachanu mishelo. Baruch Eloheinu shelachanu mishelo. Uvtuvo hayinu. Baruch Eloheinu shelachanu mishelo. Uvtuvo hayinu. Baruch uvarach shemo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Kula netal olam kuvo bituvo
Bechein bechesed uvrakamim, rachamim, hu notein lechem lechol basar, ki leolam hasto, uvtuvo hagadol. Tamid lo hasalanu, ve'al yasalanu, ma'azon leolam va'ed, ba'avor shemo hagadol. Kihel sanu farnes la'akol, umetiv la'akol, umechin mazon, lechol miryotav asher bara, baruch atah Adonai, hazan et hakol. And now the English, everyone can do that. Praise be God of whose bounty we have partaken and through whose goodness we live. By your grace and loving kindness, O Lord, you nourish and sustain us. Praised are you, our God, who provides food for all.
We thank you for our liberation from bondage and our heritage of freedom.
We are grateful for your gift of Torah, enriching the minds and souls of our people.
Remember in mercy, O Lord, your people Israel and Jerusalem, your city.
Adonai, our God, bless all assembled at these tables.
Amen.
Bless all who are rebuilding Zion so that your word may again go forth from Jerusalem.
Amen.
Bless all who help bring forth justice and peace in the world.
Amen.
Kakatu v'alhata v'savata uvarakta et Adonai Elohecha al haaretz hatova asher natan lach Baruch ata Adonai al haaretz v'al hamazon uvenei Yerushalayim ir hakodesh bimheira v'yameinu bimheira v'yameinu uvenei Yerushalayim ir hakodesh bimheira v'yameinu Baruch ata Adonai bonei v'rachamam Yerushalayim Amen. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam ha'el havinu malkeinu adireinu boreinu go'aleinu yotzreinu kedoshenu kedosh Yaakov ro'enu ro'ei Yisrael HaMelech HaTov v'meitiv lakol shebechol yom v'yom Hu heitiv, hu meitiv, hu yetiv lanu. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imaru amen. Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. And as Betsy says, if we all do the last sentence, it's as if you all did it, the whole thing with us. So everyone, may God give strength to our people and bless us all with peace. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
ready. Where is it? I don't know. Where is it? Where's the button? You don't have to get up. No? You don't have to get up. I just can't see the button. No. Hello? Doesn't. Hello? Good? Okay. Can I have your attention? Take a second to grab your seats, make sure your cell phones are off, and I welcome you. I'm wearing my other hat now, but I look terrible in hats. Today's speaker, Adrienne Black, she, her, has recently transitioned from using the name R. Derek Black. Today, we will hear her powerful story. Adrienne is the child of Don Black, a former Ku Klux Klan leader who founded the first neo-Nazi website, Stormfront, the largest racist community on the internet. She is also the godchild of former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke. Adrienne has publicly renounced white nationalism and chronicled her personal journey away from her family's beliefs in her book, The Klansman's Son. Adrienne is a doctoral candidate in history at the University of Chicago, researching the medieval and early modern origins of the concept of race and of racist hierarchies and ideologies. Since 2016, she has spoken to many audiences at universities, foundations, institutions, museums, synagogues, and churches. Adrienne was honored with the first Elie Wiesel Award given by the Wiesel family after the Nobel Peace Laureate's passing. And she has also received a humanitarian award from the Anti-Defamation League. She's been profiled in the Washington Post, People, and O, and interviewed for Fresh Air, The Daily Show, and elsewhere. Adrienne will be taking questions from the audience following her presentation, and signed copies of her book, The Klansman's Son, will be available to purchase for $20 apiece at the back of this room following today's program. So, I am honored to be able to introduce our speaker, Adrienne Black.
Hello, I've heard that this microphone requires that I speak directly into it. Can you hear me all right? I'll lean in even more. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a wonderful space. I briefly saw the sanctuary, and it's really beautiful. And I live in Baltimore. I live in downtown, so it was not a long trip for me. I've been speaking about this book for really the last few months since it came out last year in places all over the country, and so it's really nice to be home and speak to a sort of hometown audience. I grew up in Florida, and I lived in Chicago for many years while I was doing the initial part of my graduate school, but Baltimore really feels like my forever home, and so I feel very touched to be in a space, and I really appreciate that you've all taken the time to sort of come out and and I'm also looking forward to having discussion afterwards. I'm going to speak for hopefully not too long, actually, about a half an hour, and I'd like to talk about what my hopes for this book were, the things that I wrote in it, because I really did not expect to write a book for a very long time, and that changed a few years ago, and I wrote it with a hope and a few lessons that I had learned in my life, and I wanted to talk about them in this portion, and then open it up to discussion because it was a really personal book, and it was one that I was really ashamed of for a long time, and it was something that the idea of writing a book at one point, or of even really speaking out publicly about my life at one point, felt very something I really wanted to avoid at all costs. And so to have come to this place and to be able to have discussions with people in a space and be very human feels like the story of my life sort of encapsulated in a space like this. And so I'm really looking forward to having that conversation afterwards. And with that, I'll say the most important part, I think, about who my family are and what my upbringing was is not their racism, their white supremacy, their anti-Semitism. Like, these things are parts of themselves that they inherited from a fairly normal upbringing. They were middle class. My mother grew up in Florida. My father grew up in Alabama. David Duke grew up in Louisiana. And the three of them really built what they named the white nationalist movement from the time that they met as teenagers in the 1960s up until now, with a goal that they believed that they could build a movement that, if they packaged it right, if they repeated it over and over, if they built organizations and were always trying to amplify their message, that they could create a political movement. And I think what felt unique about them was not the sort of beliefs they had, because they amplified them, but they got them from the environment they grew up in white communities opposing the civil rights movement in the 1960s. What was unique about them was that when I was born, they had already spent over 30 years building a social movement that defined their lives. I was late in their life, in my parents' life. My mother and David Duke had been married over a decade before, and my two sisters are his kids. And when I came along, I don't think my parents, they were very open. They did not expect to have me at that point in their life. And I grew up seeing leaders of the white nationalist movement coming over to the house for holiday parties, coming to sort of plan the future of this movement. It was one that was deeply international. It was one that I think doesn't always look like people might expect it to. We had politicians from European far-right parties coming and having dinner at our house and sort of plotting out strategy, members who were elected into the European Parliament or serving in government in European countries, trying to build a white nationalist political movement around the world, because they had a real sense of community. It was a social movement that wasn't defined by membership in any specific organization. It was defined by people's personal identity, that they had the same heroes. They remembered the same twists in their political goals. They had the same idea of how they were going to create a political revolution together. And when they said nationalism, they didn't mean any particular country. They meant race, really in the way that the Nazis meant it, as this international thing that connected people despite the wildly different cultural situations that they were all coming from. My parents and David Duke all met, like I said, when they were teenagers, because they were looking for something that explained the world around them. The racism and the anti-Semitism that structures their belief systems were things that they learned from people around them, but what was different about them was that they weren't willing to just believe the sort of common racism and anti-Semitism and xenophobia that they experience and sort of live subtle lives. Like, my grandparents throughout my life criticized them for having joined the Nazi movement when they were teenagers and then left it and formed a Ku Klux Klan organization in the 70s and 80s and then left that, not because their ideology was changing, but because they realized each time that these labels turned people off and weren't going to build the movement that they wanted to build. And my grandparents, would chastise them and just ask them, why couldn't you just lead a normal life? You could have lived in a segregated neighborhood. You could have sent your kids to a segregated school. You didn't need to draw this much attention to yourself. And I think that's one of the things that drew me in as a kid. It was this idea that sometimes felt fairly legitimate, that they felt like they were really sacrificing something because they weren't willing to just hear white supremacy and be told that it was true without following it to this extreme place. And I have a lot of critiques about the way my parents raised me and the way they lived their lives, but one of them is not that they are disingenuous. They truly believe everything that they say they believe. And the qualities that I think draw people into this movement more than anything else are people who have an absolute impossible ability to grasp gray areas. They have an intense moral certainty. Things are very black and white for them, and things are good and evil, and there always has to be an answer to every problem in the world. They feel like they're very independent thinkers. They think that they have, done their own research and they've come to their own conclusions, that they've grown up in a society that was regularly telling them how wrong and racist they were, and yet they still embraced an ideology that got them called haters and racists. Even though they didn't embrace those terms, they believed that they had more support in the mainstream than it seemed like they were ever really given credit for. And so when I was growing up, I would be a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and I could go to rallies that David Duke was fielding in Louisiana and just see thousands of people who were not white nationalists, were just average people coming out to support someone who had been a member of the Nazi Party, who had marched in KKK robes and had led a Ku Klux Klan organization, who was still an adamant white nationalist. And thousands of people would just come out and congratulate him. I remember walking with him through a mall in Louisiana that had been boycotted by the NAACP, and he had called in opposition to that for white people in the community to come and patronize this place. And thousands of people had shown up, and I remember being a little kid and walking behind him as he shook hands and greeted people. And I, as much as a child can embrace any ideology, thought that I believed their worldview. I thought that I was not indoctrinated, and I proved that by being a 10-year-old who gave my first public interview on behalf of white nationalism. It was right before the year 2000, and my dad and I went to Chicago to speak on this daytime talk show. And I remember just having grown up seeing him give these interviews and wanting to contribute and give back. I wasn't the only kid I knew who had grown up in these movement families, because it was not unusual for people to marry within the white nationalist movement and to have kids. What was unusual was that I wanted to be a leader of it, that I wanted to speak on behalf of it, and that I was precocious enough to do that. I started a white nationalist website when I was 10, the year after my family took me out of public school. I lived in South Florida, so it is not sort of what you might expect. It was very racially diverse. It was a place that had the highest per capita Jewish population in the country at the time. And when I was in school and even afterwards, it was just never possible for me to be in any group where it didn't include plenty of people who were not white or who were Jewish, people who were the victims of this ideology. And so I knew from a young age both that my family believed in ideology that marginalized them, at least they saw it that way, is that marked them as sort of the extremists, and that my friends were the members of the families who they identified as the enemies, who didn't belong in the country. And I think being homeschooled allowed me to isolate myself from that, but it was never something that was very far or really possible to fully separate myself from. And I always thought that I was somebody who could be open to people, who always prioritized being open to other people before I met them. It was a personal value that really I felt like I could sort of align with my own family on. The idea that your beliefs couldn't be fragile, that you needed to be open to other people, you needed to be willing to meet people, to be challenged, that if anything, it would make your beliefs stronger because you would hear counterpoints to them, you'd hear counter arguments, and you'd sort of think it through. And I always felt like I was. I sort of led two lives throughout those years. While on one hand, I was increasingly giving white nationalist speeches and talks and making it clear to people when I was a teenager that I wanted to sort of embrace this leadership and this movement for a bunch of people who really at that time felt like they were getting older and didn't quite see the future of their movement. And at the same time, I wanted to be open to people in my community, wanted to be open to people I met. And I really believed that I could sort of keep those two things separate, that I could coexist like that. And as the years went on, I began an internet radio show for my dad's website, Stormfront, the first white nationalist website. I ran it for 24 hours a day, engineering other people's radio programs. I convinced David Duke to start a radio program at that point, which he still does, so I feel a little responsible for that. And on the other hand, I volunteered. I went out into the community. I tried to be somebody who could be a friend to other people, and whenever they would bring up that they had seen me on HBO or 60 Minutes espousing white nationalism as an adolescent, I would just make it clear I didn't want to talk about it. And you might be surprised how often people were just willing to focus on what it seemed like we had in common. And then as I grew, I felt like that inevitability that had begun when I was 10 really was closing in. It seemed like from the time that I was born, essentially, that I knew how the world saw me, and I knew how I felt responsible to this community of adults who I had grown up seeing just absolutely terrified of the future. White nationalists believe that the world is, they essentially are apocalyptic thinkers. They believe that the world is going to fall apart, that nations are going to be destroyed. They want a revolution. They think that race is this biological thing that separates people. They think that the world is run by a Jewish conspiracy. They believe every Jewish person in the world gets together and plans immigration and civil rights and anti-discrimination laws to sort of make white people a minority. Like, their worldview is something that on its face feels very disprovable, to say the least. These aren't things that are hard to find opponents to. And yet they isolate themselves. They build an echo chamber in a social community in conferences and rooms that are not entirely unlike this one. In conference hotels and banquets around the country to this day, people gather in suits and ties and listen to tenured professors who have waited until they were tenured to announce how intensely white supremacist and anti-Semitic they were at a point when they couldn't be fired, give speeches about the way they saw the world, and sort of trying to justify something that people told them was stupid. People told them was ignorant and hateful, but they were always smart people, and they needed their beliefs to make sense. And so I spent all those years at the feet of these professors, like going to dinner with people afterwards, trying to come up with an answer for all the random emails that I would get saying, obviously, I was indoctrinated. You grew up in a family and believe their extremist views, that it's not something you've come to on your own. And so as a teenager, I spent a lot of time talking to the smartest white nationalists I could find to sort of explain to myself how I had all these arguments and facts and what were the statistics and the genetic stuff that they believed. And I didn't have to engage too much because I knew that I had these people who felt like they were sacrificing so much, and I therefore knew what the facts were. It maybe didn't feel right. It maybe didn't feel good to be somebody who was alienated from so many people in the world before I met them. But it also meant that I couldn't just dismiss these things that I thought were true. And that was the moment where my public profile was rising. I was now in the international news. I had run for office in Florida, and I had won as a white nationalist, and that had changed my experience of the world from being the kid of white nationalists to being somebody who spoke out on my own and gave my own interviews and sort of had a movement to lead. And that was the moment that I sort of, from my perspective, took a break. I was going to go to college at that point. I think it's good to remember all of this happened before I was 18. And I applied to a liberal arts college in Florida, public school, in the Florida University system called New College of Florida. And I was very interested in the Middle Ages. I still study the Middle Ages academically. And I saw it as a way to sort of get out of the controversy for a little bit, because I tended to, when journalists would ask me what did I study, and I said the Middle Ages, they tended to change the subject pretty quickly. And so it was like a space where I felt like I could exist normally, be open to people for a little while longer before I had to embrace this future that I thought was inevitable. And when I showed up at this college that had fewer than 800 students, and was a sort of, I don't know, a scattering of people who had really self-selected into this college. It didn't have grades. It had been founded in the 1960s as a sort of countercultural school. The professor to student ratio was about 10 to 1, or other way around. And it was this place where you could make your own academic life. You named your own degree, you could make your own major and sort of build it up. You worked with a faculty advisor. It was something that I had been homeschooled my whole life, and I really wasn't even sure if I would do well in academics, because the ways that my family homeschooled me was honestly very neglectful. It was like isolating me and like letting me read whatever I wanted. So showing up at college in a space where I felt like I could sort of make my own way, I felt very comfortable. And that was somewhat odd, because it was a place that also prioritized anti-racist values, social justice. It was a place with a lot of people who were very aware that they were the victims of white supremacy and the movement that I represented. And so when I got there, I did what I kind of often did, and I did not bring up this background. I didn't necessarily feel like I was always lying. I felt like I was just leaning into what we had in common, because white nationalism is also not actually the same thing as conservatism. It's once you get sort of far enough into the right, things start looking weird sometimes. Like my family was very supportive of legal abortion. They were very supportive of socialized health care, but only for white people. Like they had a lot of policies that I think when I met lefty student organizers, as long as they didn't know my background, we kind of could talk about things and I could lean into what we had in common. And it was not very many weeks into it that I realized that this was going to be a very bad ending, because I was making relationships with people who trusted me without knowing what I was keeping from them. I remember sitting on the floor of someone's dorm while people were sort of sharing stories of the experiences of discrimination or ostracization that they had felt growing up in Florida or in other states. Somebody was describing growing up Jewish and living in a town where there was a Ku Klux Klan organization nearby who would march and protest, and how they've been very intimidated by this. And I remember sitting there realizing that this wasn't even some Ku Klux Klan group that I could condemn, because there's a lot of terrible people in the world, even from the perspective of my family, who called themselves Ku Klux Klan. No, these were people who had actually inherited the organization that my father and David had founded, that were out marching, and I knew them really well, and I knew that they would not feel like there had been any misunderstanding. Their goal had been to intimidate my friend. And the misalignment between who I knew these people I was becoming very close to were going to see me as once they knew what I believed, what I was doing in the world, and who I wanted to be reflected, was a vast gulf. And I had no idea how to sort of square it. I had no idea how to even talk about it with them. So a semester passed by. I studied abroad the second semester of the first year I was there. Was actually studying medieval history in Germany when a student posted on the student forum, this email list that everybody was subscribed to, just listing an article about me, discussing me, and what happened was I sat up for days watching as thousands of messages from all of these people who I had gotten to know and then students who I didn't know just started discussing what to do about me. And people, there was a lot of different camps. Some of them were like, is there some way we can get this person expelled? Like there was people who were saying, maybe we can persuade this person. Maybe we can, really make a big change here. And then there were people who were saying, like, the priority is not the comfort or doing work on behalf of some person who knows exactly what they're espousing in the world. The priority is making the people who are the victims of white nationalism feel like they are still safe in this campus community. And that was real. Like, my family had all my life officially condemned violence. Whenever there was a mass violence coming out of this movement, they would always say that they had banned illegal activity on their website, that they had condemned it. But personally, they thought it was like a counterproductive thing that would draw people away from the movement. It would make it less mainstream. And yet, those people always believed exactly the same thing as them. They often knew them. They often had interacted with them at some point. And my family had a protocol whenever something like this would appear in the news. It would be to sort of get as much information as possible and then sort of hope that this wasn't somebody who had posted on my dad's website. And that proximity to violence and terror was something that I couldn't deny. And when I came back to campus, I was as worried, more so than some of the students, about my connection to this movement, and if it became very public that I was there, people from this movement like coming to sort of like protect me or validate me or something. I remember when I got back, one of the first things I heard was that Hillel had stopped meeting. The students weren't intimidated specifically by me, but they were afraid because they weren't going to send an email about a Jewish student life organization meeting in a space on campus to a mailing list that now they knew had the heir to the white nationalist movement receiving all the emails. And that was a moment when it felt like I couldn't be this person who my community was reflecting back to me, but I also didn't know what to do or how to sort of argue it myself. And around that same time, I was experiencing middle fingers in the library. I was sort of I was committed to being there because I cared about the people, and I felt like it would be not me to sort of leave the school and like transfer to some place where I could be a little bit more at peace, because I cared about the community, and I wasn't somebody who was able to just see myself as like running away from people I cared about, from people who were telling me that I was not only stupid but ignorant and harmful. And somebody would post on an email list saying, that they had known me and I seemed kind of nice, and then somebody would respond and say, it does not matter what somebody is like if this is what they are doing in the world. And I never had an answer for it. Growing up, I had always had an explanation whenever I got hate mail, because I got a lot of hate mail when I was a teenager and an adolescent. A lot of death threats. It was a very scary way to grow up. And I could always dismiss it as, these people don't know me, they don't know my family, they don't know what we say, they're reacting. And at New College, I couldn't say that. I knew that the people knew me, and I had no defense when they challenged me to be a better person, to sort of stand behind. If I said that I was caring and friends with a person, then what does it mean if you then don't stand up for them? And I expected that things would just sort of go on like that. I kind of expected I'd keep going to class, maybe things would die down. I had a lot of practice with being very patient and avoidant, and people couldn't keep up their anger at me as long as I could keep up my avoidance of receiving that anger. And I thought that I could just sort of spend those years trying to be a part of the community, but also just coming to class. And that was also the moment when a friend did something that was very pivotal in my life. I knew him a little bit. We had lived catty corner in the dorms. I would play guitar in the evenings. He would come down and sing. I knew that he was Jewish. He hosted Shabbat in his dorm, but I never went. He never invited me. And he had my number because we had shared a study guide and we had friends in common and we'd sort of known each other a bit, but he found out, like everybody else, what I represented and what family I'd come from and the fact that I was still running a radio show, or at least co-hosting it with my dad. And that was the moment when he made this choice to sort of reach out to me and invite me to come to his dorm and have Shabbat with him. And it was an incredibly, shockingly selfless choice. And I've told this story a bunch of times, and he and I are very close friends now. We both live in Baltimore, actually. And it was a choice that he didn't know what the outcome would be. Like, he's very clear about it to this day, that the point was not to try to debate me into changing my mind, because he thought it was kind of disrespectful to even think that if you know someone, if you respect them and care about them, that you're going to I'm going to change you. And I think you can sort of imagine what that means. We think about persuasion a lot, but in practice, I don't think we do talk about it quite right. Like, persuasion is not, I'm going to have the best arguments and they're going to be obviously correct and you're going to accept them. And if you think about anything that's really key to who you are and how you see the world, like the idea of changing it because somebody, calls you a jerk and is going to tell you why you're wrong, it doesn't happen that much. But people do change their minds a lot. And so this is getting to the conclusion of what I want to talk about here, this sort of last chapter that led to the over a decade since I condemned my family's movement, was what happened from the result of those dinners. He initially did think he was going to sort of argue with me more than he ultimately was. And like I've said, I really tried to avoid these fights. I knew I could argue for white nationalism. I'd spent my whole life talking to journalists about it. I had spent my whole life giving speeches about it and leading marches and organizing people, trying to get them to find the best way to argue it, helping people running for office myself. I knew I could debate white nationalism. And he also knew that he hadn't spent his life debating white nationalism. He didn't have any question that it was morally and factually wrong. But that's not the same thing as trying to debate somebody who's spent their life online debating. It's not necessarily going to get you anywhere. And so he decided and told other people there to just not come if they were going to debate me, to just try to talk about other things. And weirdly, that's what happened. I ended up showing up to these dinners and came week after week, which I think is what surprised everybody. And a lot of people stopped coming to these things because I was there. And we all got closer. And we also continued to not debate it or even really acknowledge it at that point, which I think is part of my story that's one of the strangest parts, that the next step was people from those dinners realizing that they were feeling sort of complicit in creating a space that I could come and hang out and maybe feel comfortable, and they needed to know some answers. And their questions to me were, are you willing to talk about this? Like, I know you, we are maybe friends, I guess, we like each other, and what you do in the world doesn't align with who you seem to be at these dinners. And most of the people there were not even necessarily Jewish, but people who were a lot of different identities and a lot of different experiences, and people who were very horrified by racism in the world and knew the reality and the impact of it. And so the initial questions to me in private were, will you explain this to me? Like, will you explain to me what you believe? And I realized in the telling that I thought I had explained white nationalism a lot to a lot of people, but I had only ever done it to people who were either journalists interviewing me or my family, or were people who were coming to become a part of white nationalism. They had seen somebody on TV, they wanted to become members, and they wanted to become one of the tens of thousands of people who really, this was their community. And I had never explained it to somebody who I felt close to, who I trusted, who I knew it wasn't a debate in front of other people. It wasn't to score points with an audience. It wasn't to, sort of take something embarrassing and then go post it publicly. It was just to understand each other. And the person who was primarily doing this was not Jewish and was white, and so she could come in and then have these conversations without her own personal identity being quite as much tied up into it. And my explanation, she says now, was much more based in incorrect, but also things I thought were facts than she had expected. And you can sort of argue facts. You can say, like, are you willing to debate me on whatever? Are you willing to, like, listen to a better argument? Because white nationalism, as you might imagine, is not something that, like, holds up factually. It's very conspiratorial. Race is a social thing. It's a legal category. It has many centuries of history. White nationalists believe that it's biological, and it's one of the most obviously disproven things of the last century, that individuals are not predicted by their groups. And so those conversations could happen, and they took years. And I think there's a lesson that I took from that, which was that the feelings had come a lot faster. I knew that I didn't like who I was reflected as in the eyes of people in a community who I cared about, but I also felt like I couldn't just abandon these things that I thought were true. And, you know, for a long time I felt deeply ashamed of how much discussion. I would have some argument about statistics from a professor, and then we could talk about an academic article that showed that, you know, this is deeply abusing statistics, and I would take that argument out of my toolbox. And eventually I didn't have any arguments for it, but it took years, and it took relationships and sort of conversations that were not about, you know, I'm going to change your mind necessarily. They were about, you know, we care about each other, and the things you believe, the things you're doing in the world are horrendous. And they could say, I can hold both of those things, that I can see you and know you and care about you and learn to argue your beliefs as well as you can, and also hold how much I am horrified by them, how wrong I think they are. And that's the thing that I think I really want to hold on and emphasize, is that what we think of as persuasion, I think, is often, I'm going to argue you into submission. And I think we think about this for legitimate reasons. Even my experience kind of felt like persuasion in that way a lot of the time. And it wasn't until afterwards I could really look at it and recognize that it's not insanely hard to change a factual belief, to change what you think is true about people or the world. Like, you know, just take something about, like, why is the sky blue? And we may or may not have these ideas about wavelengths of light. You can imagine changing it, maybe. But what is really hard, what ultimately came to the place where I had to condemn this belief system because I knew it was wrong, both like factually and morally, and I knew I couldn't be a person who harmed the people I said I cared about. The thing that held me for a moment from wanting to do it, from wanting to publicly condemn this, was because it would separate me from all the relationships that I had built. And that was an awful feeling for somebody who had spent my whole life arguing against all the random emails from people who said you're very obviously indoctrinated, to recognize that belief systems and ideologies, one of the main things they do is tie us to our communities, tie us to the people who are the answer to the question of who do I care about, who am I loyal to, who do I feel responsible for, who, maybe to summarize it, like, who would my ears perk up if I heard that they were saying, you've changed, you know, you're different. Because this sort of sense of the ways that we connect to other people, a lot of them are based in our ideologies, our community, our sense of ourselves, our sense of not really our values, but our just beliefs that connect us together. And when we talk about somebody fundamentally changing what they believe and how they see themselves, what I really want to emphasize, because it was both true for my family when they joined this movement as teenagers, and for me in college and this experience in my early 20s, it was an experience of having to leave a community, or at least expand who I encompassed within my community. And it became clear that in order to follow the values that I had, to be somebody who was responsible for the people I cared about and people I hadn't even met yet, I couldn't be a part of a community that condemned them, that said who you could and could not love before you ever met them. It was not something that I could in good faith do, and it was not something that I could continue even being associated with, that harmed the world. And so I had to speak out against it. But what that meant was not saying, oh, you know, I've learned a better way, I've learned that what was actually correct. It meant separating myself from all the relationships of my family and all the adults who had babysat me and the friends and the people I had grown up with. And it was a sort of obvious choice, but it was one that felt like walking into a void. It was not one that felt like, joining some new community. It didn't seem like there was necessarily any kind of place for me. So I wrote a public letter, and I faced the backlash, and my family spent a week at that point, sort of debating on whether there was any relationship left. My dad called at one point and sort of said he was in so much pain he wished I had never been born, and then called me back a minute later and said he regretted that and didn't mean it. My mother cried on the phone. They both made a choice that they wanted to be able to communicate, and over a decade later, we still talk on holidays sometimes, and it's always very tense, and they're always telling me how horrified they are that I don't believe the same things as them, that I'm on the side of evil. And we still communicate, and it's incredibly tense, but it was the work of my life since then has been sort of answering the question of, like, how do I exist in the world? And it was something that was very slow. I have a community of people, but it's something that you build up very slowly over time. And I think that is just the observation that I kind of want to make, because I ended up telling a narrative in this book, one of my own experiences in the world, the sort of things that I saw growing up, the sort of violence that I saw, the people who support this movement much more firmly than I think anyone recognizes if they are not in the midst of it, if they're not the recipients of that kind of praise. I remember walking down the street when I had run for office, and just people would come out of nowhere every single day to congratulate me, and they were not white nationalists, they were just normal people. And that was the same year that Barack Obama won the presidency for the first time. These communities hold people in place, and they make it very difficult to change. It's not about, are the facts obvious? It's not about, can I argue it? It's about whether you are open to joining a community, or at least expanding the number of people who you consider yourself responsible for. And that lesson over the last decade of my life has been, sort of trying to answer where does the meaning come from. And I think the meaning is this combination of knowing what your own values are, knowing how you relate to other people, and then also sort of answering the question, at least the one that's the most important for me, is the way that you're behaving, is the way that you exist in the world, is it something that puts up a barrier, like puts up a line between where you and another person cannot interact? Are there lines, even if they're theoretical, with people you don't know, are there lines that tell you why you are not connected, or why you couldn't love or care for another person? And I think that is a sort of heuristic, a question that does answer a lot about our lives. And it's one that I think I've wrestled with a lot, and it's the one that really led me to write the book, that I spent many years speaking out publicly after I had really tried to avoid it for many years. And it was the 2020 election that I really came to a place that I recognized that I think a lot of the lessons that were coming from my life, they weren't always what I agreed with. This sort of idea that if you reach out to somebody and invite them to dinner, you'll, change them with kindness. In some ways, yes, there's a life that I led that felt that way, but I think the context of it, the fact that it was a part of a community, the fact that nobody ever had any confidence about what was going to happen, me or them or anyone else who was talking, that it was all about individual relationships and our existence within that larger community. I think that there are larger lessons there. Like, I have a unique life the way we all do, but I also think that the lessons of how we change, how we experience ourselves in relation to other people, are very universal. And I think we can all sort of imagine times and places that we have found ourselves connected to people who we didn't realize we were keeping ourselves from, or who we didn't expect to be connected to. And it's in those spaces that the things that may be better arguments, may be more true, may challenge whatever you believe, or not. Those are the moments you become more open to hearing them. It's in the resolution of a community that has decentered you, where you are trying to find the ways that you can be connected to people you care about, that we sort of expand and grow. And I don't think this is something that's limited to college at all. I don't think it's something that's limited to young people. I think it's a universal human experience, and I think it's also one that we need to be very aware of as we're going forward in a time that can often feel very precarious. And with that, I would like to conclude this sort of talking part of this. 。  . 。  . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 .
。 . 。 . . .
Hi. I just want to say that was so interesting and a really powerful example of how people can change without realizing they're changing or wanting to, just by their environment. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I have a, over here. So like, now what? I mean, it's like we're all, I think, very scared about, and I think we all appreciate, as she said, like that you're trying to make a difference, but how can we, I mean, we're scared about this nationalism, and should we be?
I mean, we always should be. I think that, I don't know, it's a big question, and I don't want to say that I don't want to imply that I have all these answers. I have life experience that I still think of myself as an activist. Like, I'm very engaged. I work with the Holocaust Museum. I work with Facing History. I work with, a lot of different civil rights and sort of civil society organizations. It's a lot of my like professional community, or people who are thinking about ways that they can affect the world. And there's never one answer. And I think the thing that I've learned is that we all have different points of contact, and I think like that's the universal aspect. I've existed in the center of a big movement that very obviously has had impacts on the world, like both tangibly and horrifyingly hurting people, and then also ideologically. And social movements can do a lot of impact, like you can be involved in that, but it's not necessarily the same for everybody. I think there's like maybe a lesson from this college experience I had, that the people who gave me the middle finger in college, I don't think we're doing something counterproductive or at all wrong. I think that that's almost like a metaphor for what most of us can do. We exist in relation to other people, and there's a lot of power in being clear about what your values are, where your lines are, asserting them, holding them against other people, especially people who are connected to you, who are a part of your community. And I think that there's a lesson that maybe sometimes gets missed in these moments where things feel very big, that I grew up seeing. Like, white nationalists are very aware of it. I think anyone in a social movement is very aware of it, that individual relationships are the things that drive the world. Like, we have a sense that the history is very large and it's bigger than us, and that causes us to kind of miss the fact that it is these individual relationships. Sometimes we don't even know what the impact of them are, that affect people, that we're always shaping ourselves around each other. I don't think people come to any change of mind or any belief really except through connection and relationship with other people. And the story there is that if you look at my life as a little example or a microcosm, like, there are people who, they weren't going to be the ones giving me the middle finger. Like, they realized their temperament was like, do you want to come to Shabbat? And they felt safe. They knew me. And I don't think invite a Nazi to dinner is ever an answer to a solution. There's never a way to solve anything. But that's why I try to give the context of it, is like, they also didn't want to be on the sidelines. They also didn't want to abdicate any kind of responsibility, and that was a way that they could act. It was they knew me. They could invite me to the dorm. I was coming over to their dorm. They had the heir to white nationalism coming over, and the question was not, how do I go find a way to impact the world? The question was, I have these connections. I have these relationships in my life. This has happened to me whether I have chosen it or not, and my decision is, what am I going to do? How am I going to act? Like, what are the ways that I can sort of be somebody who's aligned with what I want to see in the world? And I think that the optimistic version of that is that that's very powerful, and this is a scary moment, but it's also one that has examples in the past, like, not even horrifying extreme examples, but just places in American history where more ideologies much closer to white nationalism rise, and they're very aware of that. They consider this the reason they've been a social movement for 60 years is because they know there are moments when there's a lot more support for their beliefs and more institutional support, and then there are moments where they need to retrench and become more internal. And I think, to simplify it, I guess the goal is to sort of bring about a moment where they feel like they have to go a little bit more internal and sort of lick their wounds, because there are ways to do this. We all have a role, and I think that leaning into that, trying to just think about what our points of connection are in our lives. What are the things that we do that are important? That is much more of the answer than I think we fully give it credit for. It's also the thing that while we can't know how it plays out, and we can't guarantee anything, it's also the thing we have the most power over, is the relationships in our life, the ways that we show up for other people, and the choices that we make when we're faced with difficult, challenging, uncertain decisions in our life. And I take a lot more solace from that than I think I always have. I used to feel a lot more ineffectual, and I think working with people who have different ways of existing in the world, everybody has their own role, I think has made me reflect on the fact that massive things, the only massive things that have ever happened because of people's individual actions and just sort of living their lives in relation to other people. And I don't know if that feels like any kind of solace in this moment, but I think that there actually is something very big, something very, very powerful there.
Sort of going along with that question, how much contact now do you still have, either through your family or past associations, with people who feel strongly about white nationalism, who are proponents of it? And in this current kind of ugly political environment that we're existing in, where this ugly underbelly has been opened up and everyone's been given permission apparently to hate everything else, are the white nationalists feeling strong right now? Do they feel vindicated? Is this a high point for them? Is this are they saying, see, we've been telling you this all along kind of thing? That's question number one. Go ahead.
Sure. The answer to part A of question number one is that it's just my parents. Like my siblings, I don't have contact with them. They're very extreme. And I never kept in touch with the white nationalist community. It's a community of ideology. They weren't breaking down the doors to keep the relationships, but it also wasn't one I was trying to maintain. My parents, it was different. I thought it was important that we be able to talk, and I don't know, it's especially strained now. I don't know, the world, like our relationships, like my resentments, I think, are growing as I become older and look back on my upbringing, and I feel a bit less deferential to them. It's just relationships, I think, change over time, but we still talk. We can communicate. And then the answer to the second part is yes, 100%. The movement broadly views this as a high water mark. They also, I think, it should be aware, within this book I wrote a history of this movement, and I think something I want to emphasize is that this wasn't me being a historian. People within this movement are very aware that they are part of a historical thing. They're very aware of what happened in the 70s, in the 80s, and the 90s, and they're also very aware of other high water marks that I think that there's probably a lot of uncertainty among them about. I would be very surprised if there's very many people actually who say, they've achieved something. I think the way they see it is that they have had a very consistent idea that anti-Semitism and white supremacy are much more broadly held beliefs than the mass media or sort of respectable culture would have you believe. That's their foundational belief about their political movement, and they view it that over decades, they're very clear, they've been talking about it over decades, that they will be able to sort of build on that kind of backlash, and that's exactly what they would say is happening. It really vindicates their theory, but whether this is something that is then going to have a backlash to it and they're going to need to retrench, I think there's a lot of people within this movement who are very prepared for that, and I think that that's something to remember on if you're opposed to the things in this and the hateful things in this moment in our politics is there is really a future where these things are pushed back on. There's also a future where they're not. That's the inevitable future that white nationalists believe in, which I do not believe in, is a revolutionary overthrowing of the order of this society and replacement with a white supremacist Nazi state. That's what they think. That's what they're going for. I think there's a lot of people in politics who, in some way agree with that. And it's not an inevitability, though. I think it's like it gives people too much credit. And I think that one thing that is, I know more than anything else, is that the white nationalist movement is so deeply afraid. And I think everyone who is aligned with them, like the defining characteristic is that they are just afraid all the time. They're afraid of almost everything, like something that they're not even always sure what they're afraid of. It's not individual people. It's not losing finances. It is, they are afraid that the world is gonna, I don't know, defeat them, that they're going to be forgotten, that they're going to be disrespected. They're just afraid of loss and death and terror all the time. And that's not necessarily, that can seem strong, but it's not necessarily a very strong position to come from. Just being absolutely terrified all the time of everything and just being on their guard and defensive and angry is something that is only alluring in a particular moment and for a short time. And I think remembering that what we're opposing is something that is just defined by its own fear of the world is a sort of way to, I don't know, remember when you're doing anything that feels like you're opposing it, remembering that you're opposed to people who are just defined.
We have a
by their
question back
fear.
here.
Yeah, sorry.
Back here. My question, I actually had a couple, but I'm going to focus on this one. You mentioned that you started the radio program. And I noticed that, with the start of talk radio, where it really got much more conservative and everything, that, I think, started the trajectory of some of this movements being more solidified and having, as you said. So I guess my question would be to you, because we know when hate rhetoric continues and continues and is pounded every day, not just on the radio, but social media and so forth, that it doesn't stay nonviolent for long. It perpetuates itself into more violence as people get more and more rhetoric, which you mentioned about the Nazis, that their ultimate goal is maybe to create a Nazi state. So since you started a movement on the radio and maybe you have some experience with influencing people, what would you say would be a way for another movement to start in a way that would counteract this so that other voices are heard and not just the voices of hate? And is that, I just thought maybe give some thought to that.
I mean, these movements do exist. Like there's I think one way to think about the way white nationalists have always seen the world, the way I grew up with these people seeing the world, is they saw themselves as like not necessarily opposed to the world order. They specifically saw themselves opposed to the movement for anti-racism. They were deeply afraid of Antifa. They actually got physically attacked by Antifa. It was this sort of sense that there was a counter movement, that most people in the world were not engaged in the world. Most people were not aware of the future. Like they had this sort of condescending view of just most people living their lives. And their view was that the people they were really challenging were the ones who had a vision for the future that was anti-racist, that was equitable, that was challenging the economic inequalities in the world, like one that had a vision of the world that people were not defined in their life outcome by what race they were born into. Like they were opposed to the people who were doing something, who were speaking, who were acting, who were engaged in whatever way. And I remember white nationalists like saying one of the biggest strategies they had was like, if you're ever in the break room, because I think I should emphasize here that white nationalists are not like visible. I guarantee you everybody in here knows white nationalists. They're not a million of them in the world. There's like tens of thousands, but they tend to make more money. They tend to, have professional degrees. They tend to be slightly more autonomous, and they don't have swastikas on their forehead. They're average, normal-looking people because they grew up in the same society as everyone. And so you definitely interact with white nationalists. They're just they exist in the same places as everybody. And they're aware that like one of the biggest strategies they can have is if they're like in the break room or they're by the water cooler and somebody is saying something that is opposed to racism, to criticize that person, to call them, a softie or a liberal, or just like challenge them in some way to sort of get those conversations to make people feel more afraid to stand up for a different society, because their argument is, it's revolutionary, but what they really are saying is they just don't think anybody needs to change anything. They think that the world is deeply unequal, and at a fundamental level, they think that that's right. Their racism comes from justifying inequality, trying to say why the inequality is correct, and arguing for the status quo is kind of an easier position than arguing for a different sort of world. And I think that, I don't have an answer for like, how do you build a movement, or exactly what to do now, because I think it's very challenging. The social media landscape is very challenging. Radio is very challenging. The internet is, I sort of hope that the platforms become a lot less dominant, because I think it's very dangerous for them to be quite so in control of information. But despite whatever ways you do it, I think the lesson of an activist movement like that the act of speaking is the most powerful thing. You find ways to do it. I was starting internet radio before podcast existed, and that was a great way to do it. But those things sort of rise up. There's going to be new things this year. There's going to be new things next year. And not everyone is going to be a big activist who's like trying to stand up in front of people, but everybody has a relationship, a role to play somewhere, an organization that you're a part of, a community that you're in, a friend you have, and using whatever technologies exist or whatever human connections you have. I think like that's kind of the answer. And there are other, if we were having a space where we're like, how do you do movement activism? There's a lot of different answers to the ways we do that. But I think like my real succinct answer that I think actually explains it is be always looking for the ways that you can speak, like always looking for the ways you connect with other people, and we can really do something about it. Like I think I'm very opposed to the world as it is today, but there's ways to change it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I recognize, I feel like I'm not, thank you.
It's rare when you get a
Yeah.
room like this where you can hear a pin drop the entire time, and if you look out, people would probably stay another hour if they could.
Sure.
But we also want to have the time, because he will be in the back to sell the books and to book sign. But I love thanking people because it's always truly special. But it's not often I'm speechless, and at the same time have spawned so many questions and conversations in a good way. I want you to know that you are heard, seen, and appreciated, and we admire your strength and courage for you to come to a synagogue and stand before over 200 Jewish women and more on Zoom to experience your story. It takes character to change, and we appreciate you for sharing for not only your story, but yourself with us. Especially with what is going on in our world today, you bring back a glimmer of hope and faith that no matter what your circumstances are that you're brought up with, that one can still change if one chooses to. We are grateful and we feel blessed that we are part of your journey now, and we look forward to seeing what the future holds for you, and we are thrilled that you could join us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, ladies, a few things. We're going to have the raffle drawing, and if one person from each table could please take the centerpiece over to the table by the window, we would appreciate it. And there are 2 prizes that we will be calling. Gail, come on up and choose a number. Okay, got it? All right, first winning number, 28090301. And we have a winner over there. Come on up. Come on up. Adrian, pick a number. Thank you. Second winning number, 28090-315. And we got a second winner. Come on up. Thank you all very much for your attention. And we will see you on March the 31st. Where's Esther?